if I could have each of you guys kind of just share your thoughts on how the pandemic is changing higher education or how it will, and then maybe like a tip for other educational programs and schools out there looking for ways that they can keep like students engaged and on track during COVID, I think.
Alan, why don't you tackle this first question on how the pandemic is changing higher education? I know it's a big, tough question, but you can do it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a big thing. I was just thinking like maybe just share a few thoughts about it.
Sure.
Well, I think one of the things that's obvious, and that we're doing it right now, this is a very powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were intimidated by the idea of trying to do things virtually because it felt less connected than what we're used to, which is face-to-face with students. But practically speaking, I don't think we're ever going back. I think that there are going to be significant numbers of students who are going to say, you know what, I don't need to drive to a campus, or I don't need to live on campus. I don't even need to be involved with all the other activities. I can get the information I need to this way. And I think that the virtual era, the hybrid courses are going to become much more dominant moving forward. I think that's clear because students have gotten used to it. The great irony and the great challenge here is that the students who have money, who can afford to go and live on a campus, will have a much more enriched kind of experience. It's the same students who we are dealing with who are going to have to make the equation. Do I want to spend $40,000 a year to live on campus, or do I want to do this at a distance? And I think the great challenge that we will face in Cheer, and we will face in higher ed generally, is, are we going to be creating from this two totally different educational systems? One for those who can connect with people and live with people on campus, and the other for folks who are just going to dip in enough to get the information they need and the certifications they need to go to the next step. And I think that's going to be a huge issue moving forward, because I don't think the student who has gone through this is going to say, you know what, I'm going to find the $40,000 to live on campus. So we're going to be grappling with that. Mm-hmm. So that's my one thought on that, about the permanence of some of the changes and the way information is delivered and the way students learn.
I think Alan's right about that, but I also think that traditional age students coming right out of high school are still going to want to try the campus experience, the living in the dorm, and all the things that happen on campuses. And of course, schools are terrified about losing the capacity or the willingness of students to come and do that. It's a financial issue for them, their lost revenues and so on. But I think Alan is right that we're not going to go back from having virtual learning be a part of higher education. And I think the hybrid model is going to be what's going to be happening. And I think the schools that continue to be creative about that, while still trying to attract those students who can come to campus, either can afford it or can find the financial aid to do it, that is still going to be there for the time being.
And I'll say that for many people, so long you could be passive about work or school. Basically, you just showed up, and sometimes you were into it, or not into it. In this climate, you could just goof off and never show up and never be anything. But I think this is forcing people to be self-motivated, to determine that they need to grow up, they need to show up, they need to buckle down and be self-motivated, to be organized, and determine what it is they want to get out of the end of this project or time that they're spending, and have something to show for it in the end. So, for a student, for a professional, I think it's really forced folks to engage in some self-regulation and self-discipline to get anything done at all. So I think, that's going to be a plus if people can really grow with that and not fall back into, oblivion and get nothing and do nothing.
Yeah.
At one point, if I may add it to what Donna was saying, if you look at what's going on at high schools right now, up to 20% of the students who we tend to follow, who are the first generation students, the urban students, have disappeared from high school programs. And we haven't really looked at that because we're, as Donna said, we're looking at self-regulation. We're looking at the students who are trying to engage. We have a whole lost generation here that we haven't had a chance even to begin to think about, who are elsewhere in terms of where they are in process. And there are probably 10% of them at college as well who just sort of dropped out along the way that we have to find and bring back into the fold.
Maybe that's a conference topic, Alan.
Yeah, that could be.
You know, Savannah, I know you want to wrap things up, but you asked, did we have any tips for people?
Yes, no, I definitely want to hear the tips.
Yeah, I mean, I think this applies to not just college, but also to K through 12. I have a daughter who's an elementary school teacher in New York City, has been teaching online for 8 months. I think the overused word for institutions, whether it's K-12 schools or high schools or colleges, is constant communication. Many students are feeling lonely. You know, they're home, they're there with family, they're sick of seeing their families every day. I don't know about you guys, but let's see, I've got my door closed, so I think my wife can't hear me. See the same people every day, it can get overwhelming. But students need regular contact with campuses, with teachers, with counselors, with administrators, even if it's just a text message that says, "Hey, Jimmy, hey, Joni, how are you doing? You know, what's new? Anything we can do to help?" That then leads to the more substantive connections around the coursework or whatever it is they need to do. I don't think schools can over communicate in terms of staying in touch with students, because students are really desirous of connections.
Yeah, I definitely. Oh, my mic. I agree on that, because I in school, when I was in school, we did the hybrid learning, and I went to class, but then you do it online, and it's just, there's a different, at least for me, it's definitely a different learning experience online versus in person, and you lack that interaction with your teacher, with your peers. It's hard.
Well, they both have their value.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why the schools that are going to do well, I think, are the ones that can develop a hybrid model that uses the best of both.
Exactly.
And Savannah, it's worth reminding the people who listen that our focus is on a specific subpopulation. We're not saying that this is the way it is for all students, but the students that we focus on are, generally speaking, urban kids or rural kids who are not part of the normal, you grow up, you're going to go to college because your parents did generation. And their needs and their problems and their challenges are very different.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Donna, is there any tip you want to give before we wrap it up?
I would just say, with this period, that students and professionals need to determine, what am I going to have to show for, at the end of this period. It's not the ideal situation, but in the end, do I want to have squandered my time, or do I want to have taken advantage of the isolation and really bone up my skills and improve what I can do and what I can be, given this time of lack of interruptions by people and socializations and distractions. And that's not always easy to do, but it takes a certain bit of self-determination to say, this is what I want to have come out of this in the end.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely, there's definitely different types of people. It's either like we use this time to improve on ourselves, like you said, no distractions, and really grow, or we don't. So yeah. Okay, well, thanks again, guys. I really enjoyed talking to you, learned a lot, and I think it's really going to help our listeners out there and our educators out there that are like, how do I keep my students going?
Yeah, you can whiz through it because
Yeah.
it's a lot.